They refuse to build more roads as a ploy to get you out of your cars into public transportation, restricting mobility. And there's a shortage of houses because they created it, so prices go up. Populations will have to be controlled because now they've created a shortage of land. And third, inside the human habitat areas, government is controlled by an elite ruling class called stakeholder councils. These are mostly non-governmental organizations or NGOs who, like thieves in the night, just show up to stake their claim to enforce their own private agendas. The function of legitimate government within the system will be simply to enforce the dictates of the council. These councils fit almost perfectly in the definition of a state Soviet, a system of councils that report to an apex council and then implement a predetermined outcome. Soviets are the operating mechanism of a government-controlled economy. And the fourth path is public-private partnerships. Today, many freedom organizations are presenting public-private partnerships as free enterprise and as a private answer for keeping taxes down, using business to make a better society. In truth, many public-private partnerships are nothing more than government-sanctioned monopolies in which a few businesses are granted special favors like tax breaks, the power of eminent domain, non-compete clauses, and specific guarantees for return on their investments. That means they can charge what they want and they can use the power of government to put competition out of business. This is not free enterprise, and it is these global corporations that are pushing the green agenda. For example, using government, a government bill to ban its own product, General Electric is forcing the mercury-laden green light bulbs on you, costing 5 times the price of an incandescent bulb. Such is the reality of green industry. Public-private partnerships are building the Trans-Texas Corridor, which supposedly doesn't exist, using eminent domain to take more than 580,000 acres of private land, prime farmland, sanctioned by the partnership with the Texas government. And public-private partnerships are taking over highways and local water treatment plants in communities across the nation. It is not free enterprise, but a Mussolini-type fascism that will only lead to tyranny. And it's all driven by the Agenda 21 blueprint of sustainable development. Truly, sustainable development is designed to change our way of life. Local communities are now being targeted by international forces, and here's how. In June of 2005, I reported on the UN's efforts to recruit the nation's mayors to directly impose sustainable development policy into our local communities. The mayors were invited to attend the UN's World Environment Day conference in San Francisco. The mayors weren't there to simply discuss. They actually committed to an agenda with specific goals. As part of their participation, the mayors were pressed to commit to specific legislation and policy goals by signing a slate of UN accords. 2 documents were presented to the mayors for their signatures. The first document was called the Green Cities Declaration, produced by the United Nations Environment Program. This document was essentially a statement of principles which set the agenda for the mayors' assigned tasks. The declaration is amazingly bold in that it details exactly how the UN intends to implement a very specific agenda in every town and city in the nation. The final line of the declaration explained the UN's goals very explicitly. It said, quote, "Signatory cities shall work to implement the following urban environment accords. Each year, cities shall pick 3 actions to adopt as policy or laws." And that leads to the second document signed by the mayors called the Urban Environment Accords. The document included exactly 21 specific actions as in Agenda 21 for the mayors to take, controlled by a timetable for implementation. For example, under the topic of energy, Action item number 1 called for the mayors to implement a policy to increase the use of renewable energy by 10% within 7 years. These are mayors that we're talking about. Energy action items numbers 2 and 3 dealt with reducing energy consumption. These items are classic examples of the UN trying to go around the U.S. Congress and federal energy policy and force a backdoor implementation of the UN's Kyoto Accord, which the United States has never ratified. Perhaps the most egregious action offered in the Urban Environment Accords dealt with the topic of water. Action item number 19 called for adoption and implementation of a policy to reduce individual water consumption by 10% by 2015. Interestingly, the UN document begins by stating, quote, cities with potable water consumption greater than 100 liters per capita per day will adopt and implement policies to reduce consumption by 10% by 2015. Now, there's no scientific basis for this 100-liter figure other than to employ a very clever use of numbers to lower the bar and control the debate over water consumption. You must be aware that 100 liters is equal to about 26 gallons per person per day. According to the UN, each person should have less than 26 gallons per day to drink, to bathe, to flush toilets, to wash clothes, to water lawns, to wash dishes, to cook, take care of pets, and more. But according to the U.S. Geological Survey, Americans actually need about 100 gallons per day to perform these basic life functions. The use of the 100 liters number versus 100 gallons is a direct attempt to mislead and actually cut water use by 75%. Consider also that there is no specific water shortage in most parts of the United States. Water is not an international issue. It is a very local one. Perhaps the most outrageous promise of action by the mayors is action item number 16, which they agreed, quote, every year identify 3 products, chemicals or compounds that are used within your city that represents the greatest risk to human health and adopt a law or eliminate their sale and use in the city. There you have it. The mayors have been promised to ban something every year. That's the UN's version of a free society. But here are some questions for the mayors. What if there isn't a chemical or a compound that poses a risk? What if the community actually needs them? What if jobs are at stake? What about private property or free enterprise? Not a consideration. The mayor has got to ban something anyway. He signed an agreement. That's not to be taken lightly with environmental protection at stake. Now consider this bit of real-life insanity as an example of how serious it can get. In the 1990s, Anchorage, Alaska had some of the most pristine water in the nation. It literally had no pollution. Yet because of government-mandated clean water standards, the federal government ordered the city to meet strict federal rules that required the city to remove a certain percentage of pollution from its water. The city just couldn't do it because there wasn't that amount of pollution to be removed. But the government insisted that the law be upheld, no exceptions. Therefore, in order to meet the federal requirements and avoid huge fines and jail terms, Anchorage city officials were forced to pollute its pristine water by dumping fish parts into it so they could clean that out for the required quota. So it's not far-fetched to say, if your mayor has to ban the ink in your fountain pen to meet his quota, ban it he will. Again, the UN's meeting with the mayors took place in 2005. Today, in 2009, what are the consequences? Plenty.